Confronted my brother-in-law's girlfriend for her racist jokes after sending a meme about immigrants, and now she's begging for forgiveness. I, 30F, moved to the UK nearly 7 years ago from the US. I was able to get a UK passport from my father, who immigrated to the US where he met my mother. She actually fled to the US from South America. After university, I decided to live and travel throughout Asia and the Middle East for a few years, teaching English in poor, and sometimes dangerous, areas, before I finally made the decision to go back to my roots and move to Europe for good. All of this is important for later. 4 years in, I met the love of my life and we got married. We decided to buy a house in the countryside, and as we are getting things ready with the mortgages, family was kind enough to let us move into their home for the time being. This was a massive change for me, but I didn't care as I grew to be a part of his family, including his only brother, Matt, who I consider to be the brother I never had. My husband and I were there whenever Matt went through breakups and gave him dating advice whenever he was seeing someone new, until he finally met Vicky. When we met her, we thought she was sweet, down to earth, and didn't take herself too seriously, which is what Matt needed, but over time she started to display questionable behavior traits. Once at the dinner table, I said something about being Latina and she said, "Well, at least you're not a dirty Indian." Mind you, my husband, Matt, and I are all for some dark humor, but that comment almost knocked me off my chair. In fact, I don't think we all think she said what she said because it was so out of the blue. She was obviously trying to be funny, so we all laughed, but it was obvious that it made us uncomfortable. Another time, I took my husband to Turkey for his birthday and I sent a video to our family group chat of him sun tanning by our hotel's pool with the sound of the call to prayer echoing from the Blue Mosque in Hagia Sophia. As a response, she texted, "That sound would freak me out," clearly suggesting that it sounds like a /I boomer. I can see how that would fly over people's heads, but I knew what she was talking about. But I get it, she has never been to the Middle East, so as someone who has lived there, I took the time to educate her on what the call to prayer is and how it's actually beautiful. However, it wasn't until yesterday, when I've had enough of her closed-minded remarks that she clearly tries to pass off as lighthearted jokes. As I mentioned, the family has a group chat where we send memes and jokes to each other at times. As you can imagine, Vicky sometimes doesn't know how to read the room and sends inappropriate memes to the family, and yesterday she sent a meme that was a picture of a huge group of immigrants on an inflatable raft in middle of the ocean with a caption that said, "Where's Jaws when you need him?" My husband thought it was too much, and so did his mom. I, on the other hand, was like hell to the absolute and definite fuck no. I was this close to going on the group chat and calling her out for the bigot she was in front of everyone, but my husband stopped me, so I decided to spare the drama and DM her. I told her that was a fucked up joke, especially considering that she knows that both of my parents were immigrants, wherein which my mom had to flee her own country. She immediately started apologizing and saying that she didn't know, which I found hard to believe. We've known each other for a year and we've discussed this before, so either she's lying or stupid. She immediately deleted the meme off the chat along with the gif of her giggling about it as a response to my reacting with a shocked face emoji. This morning she sent me a long paragraph about how she is upset that she upset me and that she loves me and that I'm like a sister to her. I appreciate her apologizing and all, but it really gives me the ick to associate with anyone who thinks it's funny to joke about wishing death upon a certain type of people. Is she that closed-minded, or is she that desperate for attention that she's trying to get it in the wrong way? I completely understand that she doesn't come from the same background as me or had the opportunities to travel like I did, therefore it's natural to be ignorant, and I don't want to fall out with Matt. And this has nothing to do with politics or anything, it's just a cruel thing to say, and there is such thing as a bad joke. So would I be the if I flat out call her a racist/bigot the next time I see her and distance myself from her, or should I just accept her apology and drop it? Update 1. Last I left it, I said that Vicky sent a long paragraph with a dramatic apology saying that I am like a sister to her, but after reading a few comments I realized a few points. First off, how can she consider me as a sister when she clearly doesn't know me and never even cared to know me? Secondly, Vicky is only apologizing because she got called out and not because she realized that the meme she sent was out of line. I could probably forgive her if this was an isolated incident, but it wasn't. As I mentioned, she made racist comments twice before but never got called out for it, and now that she's all of a sudden apologetic? If no one have ever said anything, I guarantee she would still think those kind of jokes are okay. I ignored her apology at first, but when Sunday came around and she and Matt were planning to come for our family dinner day, she texted me again asking if we are okay, and the only reply I could give her was, "I accept your apology." Put it that way. It didn't take long for her to cry to Matt about it, who then called his mother to bitch about how mean I was being and how they are scared to come to dinner for fear of what I might say or stir up a bad atmosphere. I told my husband to explain to his mother that I am not one to cause a show, especially in their house, that they were so gracious to let us stay in while we were moving house. I have accepted Vicky's apology and will be civil, meaning if she wants to speak to me I will listen and answer, but I will not go out of my way to speak to her. My husband and I were out for a bit, seeing a friend for a bit before we had our family dinner. When we came back there was Matt and Vicky sitting on the couch. The moment I walked in, Matt had this uncomfortable smirk on his face. The kind of smirk you make when someone you hate walks into the room and makes eye contact with you and you have to be nice about it. Vicky gave me a hi in the voice of a mouse and immediately started having a staring contest with the floor, which was fine considering I made zero eye contact with her throughout the whole evening. When we were at the table I was chatty and made it out to seem that I was unbothered. Meanwhile Vicky was across the table acting all quiet and sad and making the situation awkward. Eventually, she texted Matt under the table saying that she wanted to leave once dinner was finished. Mom and Dad knew the reason why Vicky and Matt left so quickly and they became upset. They had a go at my husband about why I can't let it go and how I was the one that made Vicky uncomfortable with the way I did not speak, let alone look at her once the entire time. I defended myself to my husband saying that she and Matt were the ones that made it awkward from the second I walked into the room. Not to mention that if Vicky truly wanted to square things away she should have pulled me aside to talk instead of thinking that things are going to be easily settled through a text message. I always found her to be the type that constantly plays the victim, but now I feel like she's trying to rope the family into thinking that I am the odd just because I refused to let a stupid joke that was a mistake to post slide and play nice for the sake of peace in the family. Now, I don't know what to do as everyone in the family is thinking that it is up to me to fix this even though I wasn't the one who stupidly posted a shitty joke on the family group chat. Update 2. I was hoping that I could continue to keep Vicky at arm's length and she would eventually get used to it, but after what happened I am gonna need some advice on what to do going forward until the day Matt finally opens his eyes and realizes who he's dating. Right after that Sunday dinner when Vicky made an awkward scene in front of the whole household, my in-laws voiced their disappointment in me to my husband for being so harsh. Again, all I did was not acknowledge Vicky and kept my distance. Side note, there have been some of you in the comments questioning my husband's reaction to this whole thing and I want to make this absolutely clear. My husband has been defending me from the very beginning. He always agreed that the joke she made was completely out of line and that Vicky is the type that doesn't know the difference between being funny and being inappropriate, especially around his parents. In fact, I actually felt bad because although his parents were angry with me they took it out on my husband as if he had any part to play in this. Despite that, he fiercely defended me by explaining in full detail about my family's history as immigrants and even told them the story of how my mother had to flee her country and be separated from her family, which is something I never explained to my in-laws. He also pointed out that not only is this not the first time Vicky has said something racist but she builds her entire personality on being inappropriate and that his parents has seen her behavior for themselves. Therefore, I should not be forced to interact with her, especially on her terms, when she makes me feel uncomfortable. What's more, my husband pointed out how I was the chatty one meanwhile Vicky didn't say a word the entire dinner and made Matt leave dinner early with her simply because I didn't look at her. In fact, my husband's exact words to my in-laws were, "And what if she did look at Vicky? Then Vicky would have complained that she was giving her nasty looks. Besides, is that all she has to complain about? Because she didn't look at her?" All four of us dropped it and moved on until Sunday came around again. It happened to be Mother's Day in the UK, so for the sake of my mother-in-law, I was going to make myself extra chatty at dinner and not make it obvious that I was still stonewalling Vicky. My husband is a personal trainer, so he had a few clients to train but was going to return in time for dinner. I decided to pass the time by getting a head start on my work and stayed in our room working on my laptop with my AirPods blasting in my ears. Around early afternoon, I received yet another text from Vicky saying that she and Matt are coming to dinner and that she's looking forward to seeing me. I left her on read and continued my work. Dinner usually starts at 7 p.m. and Matt and Vicky usually turn up an hour to 30 minutes before. Unbeknownst to me, Matt and Vicky decided to show up at 4 p.m. After a few hours, I came downstairs to check if my mill needed a hand. I was surprised to see Vicky and Matt already sitting at the table. When I asked if they had just arrived, Matt replied that they arrived hours ago. I then turned my attention to Grandma to say hello and at the corner of my eye I saw Vicky and Matt looking at each other awkwardly. At this point, I was just gonna let Vicky play the victim card until she made herself look pathetic while I act completely normal. The entire dinner was great as we all laughed and talked just like we always have. But then we finished dessert and that's when Vicky spoke up and said, "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." The whole table went silent and I took a massive swig of my wine because I knew what was coming and I started to seethe. Seething at how she was about to force me to be nice to her by guilt-tripping and embarrass me in front of everyone. Seething at how she would rather cause a scene at the table on Mother's Day instead of taking the 3 hours that she had when she arrived to pucker up the courage to come upstairs and knock on my door to talk about this elephant in private. Most importantly, I was seething at how she was about to play the victim over something she did. I gave her a chance though. A chance to correct herself by saying, "You really want to do this here?" She insisted because the way I told her I accept the apology. Put it that way and me ignoring her text was immature. That's when the wine I just downed kicked in and I let her have it. At that point my mill stood up and told us both to shut up and stop bickering, then ran upstairs to cry. There was a brief silence after we heard her bedroom door slam and all I could say was, "Well, congratulations, Vicky. You ruined Mother's Day. I hope this show you created was worth it." Vicky then got out of her seat and ran to the back garden to cry with Matt running after her. My husband just looked at me stunned at what happened, but I was relieved when he took my hand because I knew he was still on my side. Mill managed to calm down and came back downstairs. Bless her, she said that I was the best thing that has ever happened to her son and she loves me, but she doesn't want this to cause a wedge between her two sons. I assured her that I had dropped this since the day I wrote to her saying that I accepted her apology, so I don't know why she had to take it to that level. Mill then said that she wants our dinners to go back to how they were before all this and not have any tensions, to which I reiterated that I never did anything to cause tensions. Out of nowhere, Phil screamed out while looking at my husband dead in the eyes, "You need to stop this," and smashed a wine glass on the table. I then ran upstairs and started packing my stuff. It's one thing for being reprimanded for something I did not cause and standing up against bad behavior, but to see my husband catching blame for something that has nothing to do with him made me sick. If anything, Phil should have directed that anger towards Matt for not controlling his troll of a GF to shut her mouth in the first place. Husband begged me not to go, but I just couldn't bear to be around his parents with this sort of bad atmosphere hanging over us. I left in a hurry and stayed in an Airbnb near my office. As of now, I am staying with a friend until the process for getting our house is finalized. Husband keeps telling me that his parents wants me to come back, but I keep refusing because although it has been weeks I still feel embarrassed. So Redditors, I am left with 2 questions. 1. Should I get over what happened and go back? 2. Most important question, it's clear that Matt doesn't have the spine to break up with Vicky even after witnessing her obsession for drama, therefore how am I supposed to interact with Vicky whenever I have to see her again? I was planning to continue giving her the cold shoulder and not talking to her or looking at her like before, but husband pointed out that she will want me to do that because then she can use that as ammo against me. She will try to test my damn patience and bait me into making her look like the poor victim. I don't want that bitch to win. How should I do it? Update 3. First off, we finally moved into our new house. After weeks of staying with my friend and my husband going back and forth between his parents' place and mine, we got the keys to our countryside home. The moment we stepped through that door together, I felt like I could finally breathe again. We spent the first week just setting everything up, painting walls, and making it ours. My husband kept saying how nice it was to have our own space where we could just be us without any drama. Speaking of drama, I did eventually go back to my in-laws' house, but only for a proper sit-down conversation. My mill had been texting my husband daily asking when I was coming back, and Phil even called to apologize for smashing the glass, though he still maintained that someone needed to put an end to the nonsense. After talking it through with my husband, I agreed to meet them for lunch, neutral territory at a restaurant halfway between our new place and theirs. The lunch was tense at first. Mill hugged me tight when she saw me, and Phil gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder. We made small talk about the house and my work until finally Mill brought up the situation. She said she'd had a long talk with Matt and Vicky separately and made it clear that what happened at Mother's Day dinner was unacceptable. Apparently, she told Vicky that forcing a confrontation at a family dinner was inappropriate and that if she wanted to resolve issues with me, she needed to do it privately and respectfully. I appreciated Mill standing up for proper behavior, but I was still wary. I told them both that I valued them as family and didn't want this situation to come between us, but I also wasn't going to pretend to be best friends with someone who had repeatedly made racist comments and then tried to make herself the victim when called out. Phil surprised me by saying he understood and that family doesn't mean you have to like everyone equally, it just means you try to be civil for the sake of those you love. We agreed that Sunday dinners would continue, but with a new rule, no bringing up personal conflicts at the table. If anyone had an issue with someone else, they needed to address it privately. I was satisfied with this arrangement and honestly relieved that they seemed to understand my position. The real twist came 2 weeks later when Matt showed up at our new house alone. My husband was out for a run, so it was just me and Matt awkwardly standing in our half-furnished living room. He asked if we could talk, and I braced myself for another defense of Vicky's behavior. Instead, he broke down crying. Like, full-on sobbing in my living room. Between gasps, he told me that he'd started noticing things about Vicky that he couldn't unsee. After the Mother's Day incident, he began paying more attention to her comments around other people and realized that what I'd experienced wasn't isolated. She'd made similar jokes about his co-worker's Indian wife, a black family at the restaurant they frequented, and even an elderly Chinese couple at the grocery store. I thought she was just being edgy or that I was being too sensitive, he said, but after seeing how upset you were and how she handled it, I started to wonder if maybe there was something more to it. The final straw came when Matt took Vicky to meet his childhood best friend who had recently moved back to the UK with his husband. Apparently, Vicky made several homophobic comments disguised as jokes throughout the evening. When Matt confronted her about it later, she dismissed him, saying his friend was too sensitive and that everyone thinks these things, I'm just brave enough to say them. I sat there stunned as Matt told me he'd broken up with Vicky 3 days ago. He said he felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner and for letting her behavior affect his relationship with me and his brother. He apologized profusely and asked if we could try to rebuild our relationship. I was speechless. Part of me wanted to say I told you so, but seeing him so genuinely upset made me realize he was truly remorseful. I told him I forgave him and that I was proud of him for standing up for what's right, even when it was difficult. When my husband came back from his run and found his brother and me laughing over tea in the kitchen, he nearly fell over in shock. The 3 of us spent the evening catching up, and it felt like old times, before Vicky entered the picture. Of course, this being my life, the drama wasn't quite over. The next day, I received a barrage of texts from Vicky accusing me of poisoning Matt against her and ruining her life. She claimed I'd been jealous of her from the beginning and had manipulated everyone into hating her. The messages got increasingly unhinged, culminating in her threatening to expose me to the family for things I supposedly said about them, all completely fabricated, of course. I showed the messages to my husband, who immediately called Matt, Turns out Vicky had been harassing him too, showing up at his workplace and blowing up his phone with calls and texts. Matt had already blocked her number, but she kept creating new accounts to contact him. The situation escalated when Vicky showed up at our house unannounced last weekend. I was home alone, working on some reports for work, when the doorbell rang incessantly. I looked through the peephole and saw Vicky standing there, mascara running down her face. I didn't open the door but called my husband, who was at the gym with Matt. They both rushed over while I stayed locked in our bedroom, listening to Vicky alternating between screaming my name and sobbing on our porch. By the time my husband and Matt arrived, Vicky had moved on to pounding on our windows. Matt tried to calm her down, but she was completely hysterical, screaming about how I'd stolen her life from her. When she saw my husband recording her behavior on his phone, smart man, she lunged at him, trying to grab his phone. That's when our neighbor, a retired police officer, came over to see what the commotion was about. Seeing the situation, he helped my husband and Matt restrain Vicky until the actual police arrived. They took her away, and Matt filed for a restraining order the next day. I did the same. We later found out from mutual friends that Vicky had been telling everyone who would listen that I was a manipulative bitch who had turned Matt against her because I was secretly in love with him. When that didn't get the reaction she wanted, she switched to claiming I was racist against white people and had been making comments about her behind her back. Thankfully, most people who know me didn't believe a word of it. The silver lining to all this chaos is that it's brought our family closer together. My in-laws, having witnessed Vicky's meltdown firsthand, they came over after my husband called them, finally understood what we'd been dealing with. Phil even apologized to me privately for not seeing the situation clearly from the beginning. Sunday dinners have resumed, and they're actually enjoyable now. Matt is slowly getting back to his old self, though he's understandably wary about dating again. My husband and I are settling into our new home, and I'm finally feeling like I belong in this family. As for Vicky, we heard she's moved back to her parents' house in another city. The restraining orders are in place, and while I hope she gets the help she clearly needs, I'm just relieved to have her out of our lives. Update 4. It's been almost 6 months since my last update, and I can't believe how much has changed. Life in our countryside home has been peaceful, the kind of peace I hadn't realized I was missing until we finally had it. My husband and I have settled into a comfortable routine, and our relationship with his family has actually grown stronger since the whole Vicky debacle. Matt has been doing remarkably well. After taking some time to focus on himself, he started dating again about 3 months ago. Nothing serious, just casual dates here and there as he rebuilds his confidence. He's been coming over for dinner at our place at least once a week, and it's been wonderful having my brother-in-law back in our lives without the dark cloud that was Vicky hanging over us. The restraining orders against Vicky have remained in place, and for the most part, we hadn't heard anything from her. That is, until last month when something completely unexpected happened. I was in London for a work conference, my first overnight trip away from our new home. After a long day of presentations and networking, I was exhausted and decided to grab dinner at a small restaurant near my hotel before turning in for the night. I was scrolling through my phone while waiting for my food when I heard someone say my name. I looked up, and there she was. Vicky. My first instinct was to leave immediately. The restraining order technically only prevented her from coming to our home or contacting us directly, but still, this felt like a violation. Before I could gather my things, she held up her hands in a gesture of peace. "Please, just 5 minutes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I promise." Against my better judgment, I stayed. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I was just too tired to create a scene, but I nodded for her to sit down across from me. Vicky looked different. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. She seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than the woman who had screamed on our porch 6 months ago. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began, her eyes fixed on the table between us. "Twice a week since. Well, since everything happened." She explained that after moving back in with her parents, she had hit rock bottom. Her behavior had alienated not just Matt and our family, but most of her friends as well. Her parents had given her an ultimatum: get help or find somewhere else to live. "I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder," she said. "It doesn't excuse what I did or said, but it helps me understand why I reacted the way I did when I felt rejected." She went on to tell me that part of her therapy involved making amends where possible, which is why she had been hoping to run into me or Matt eventually. She'd moved to London for a fresh start and a specialized treatment program. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or to be part of your lives again," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now how harmful my words and actions were. The jokes I made weren't jokes at all, they were racist and cruel, and I'm truly ashamed." I sat there in stunned silence, my dinner forgotten. This was not at all what I had expected from a chance encounter with Vicky. "I've been doing a lot of work on examining my prejudices and where they came from," she continued. "My therapist has helped me see how much of it was learned from my family environment and never questioned. It's not an excuse, but I'm committed to unlearning those patterns." I finally found my voice and asked her why she thought I would believe any of this, given her past behavior and the lies she'd spread about me after the breakup. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter. It was from her therapist, confirming her diagnosis and regular attendance at both individual and group therapy sessions. She also showed me a journal she'd been keeping as part of her treatment, pages filled with reflections on her behavior and the harm she had caused. "I don't expect you to trust me," she said. "I wouldn't trust me either. But I needed to say this to you face to face, even if you never want to see or hear from me again." I told her I appreciated her apology but that I needed time to process everything. We exchanged a few more words before she left, leaving her contact information just in case but promising she wouldn't reach out to me directly again. When I got back to my hotel room, I called my husband immediately and told him everything. He was as shocked as I was, and we agreed I should tell Matt as well, which I did the next morning. Matt's reaction was complicated. He was skeptical, of course, but also seemed relieved to hear that Vicky was getting help. He admitted that despite everything, he had worried about her and felt guilty about how things had ended, even though he knew breaking up was the right decision. After returning home, the three of us had a long conversation about whether to believe Vicky's apparent transformation. We decided to cautiously accept that she might be genuinely trying to change, but to maintain our boundaries nonetheless. Weeks passed without any contact from Vicky, which actually lent credibility to her claims of respecting our space. Then, about 2 weeks ago, something happened that none of us could have anticipated. My in-laws were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary with a dinner at an upscale restaurant in the city. The whole family was there, including some extended relatives I hadn't met before. Midway through the evening, I excused myself to use the restroom and nearly collided with a woman coming out. It was Vicky's mother. I recognized her from photos Matt had shown us during their relationship. She recognized me too, and for a moment, we both just stood there, frozen in awkward silence. "You're Matt's ex's mother," I finally said, immediately regretting how accusatory it sounded. She nodded, looking uncomfortable. "And you're his sister-in-law." I should go back to my table. As she tried to move past me, I surprised myself by asking, "How is Vicky doing?" She stopped, and turned back to me, her expression softening slightly. "She's doing better. The therapy seems to be helping. She told me she ran into you a few weeks ago." I nodded, and before I could stop myself, I asked, "Did she tell you why we had that falling out in the first place?" Her face flushed with what looked like shame. "Yes. She told us everything. About the comments she made. The way she behaved." She paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "I owe you an apology too. Those attitudes. They didn't come from nowhere." She went on to explain that after Vicky's breakdown and subsequent diagnosis, their whole family had been encouraged to participate in some therapy sessions. It had been a wake-up call for them to examine their own prejudices and the environment they had created. "We never thought of ourselves as racist," she said quietly. "We just made jokes behind closed doors, but hearing how those jokes affected real people, how our daughter took those attitudes and amplified them. It's been a difficult reckoning." I stood there, completely unprepared for this conversation. Before I could respond, my husband appeared, concerned about how long I'd been gone. When he saw who I was talking to, his protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. I assured him it was fine and introduced them. After an awkward exchange of pleasantries, Vicky's mother excused herself to return to her family's table on the other side of the restaurant. When we returned to our table, I quietly filled Matt in on the encounter. He seemed shaken but said nothing as we rejoined the anniversary celebration. Later that night, as my husband and I were getting ready for bed, he asked me what I was thinking about the whole situation. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to believe people can change. Another part of me is waiting for the other shoe to drop." He nodded, understanding my caution. "What would you want to do if she really has changed? If this isn't some elaborate act?" I thought about it for a long time. "I don't think I could ever be friends with her," I finally said. "Too much has happened. But maybe we could reach a place where we can be in the same room without restraining orders and drama." The next day, Matt called me. He'd been thinking about everything and had decided to reach out to Vicky, not to rekindle their relationship, but to have a conversation about closure and healing. He asked if I would be okay with that. "It's your life, Matt," I told him. "If you think talking to her would help you move forward, then you should do it." He met with her last weekend at a public cafe. My husband and I were on standby in case things went south, but Matt reported that the conversation was civil and even productive. Vicky had apparently continued her apology tour, taking full responsibility for her behavior without making excuses. They talked for over 2 hours, and while Matt said it was emotionally draining, he also felt a weight had been lifted. "She's different," he told us afterward. "Or she's trying to be. I don't know if people can change that much, but it seems like she's genuinely trying." Yesterday, I received a handwritten letter from Vicky. Unlike her previous messages, this one wasn't asking for anything or trying to explain away her actions. It was simply thanking me for giving Matt the space to meet with her and expressing hope that someday, the restraining orders wouldn't be necessary. At the bottom, she'd written, "I understand if you never want to hear from me again. If that's the case, this will be my last communication. But if someday you're open to it, I would welcome the chance to show you through actions, not just words, that I'm committed to being better." I haven't decided how to respond yet, or if I should respond at all. Part of me is still wary, remembering the chaos she brought into our lives. But another part wonders if holding on to anger serves any purpose if she's genuinely changed. For now, I'm focusing on the life my husband and I have built together. Our countryside home is finally fully furnished, and we're talking about starting a family soon. Sunday dinners with the in-laws continue to be drama-free, and Matt seems happier than he has in a long time. I don't know what the future holds regarding Vicky. Maybe in time, the wounds will heal enough for some kind of civil interaction. Or maybe our paths will simply diverge, and this chapter will remain closed. Either way, I've learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, is always worth it in the end.